Hello all, Alison here. Welcome back to Words and Pictures for a few minutes of fun. I was working on a page spread in this altered book journal yesterday and realised that it's really nearly finished, because by the time I've glued pages together here, that's not many spreads left. And so I thought, well, really, I need to cover a new one so that I'm ready when this finishes. I don't feel bereft at not having this one to play in anymore. And so I thought today I'd just invite you along for the covering process. I think probably it's going to be a two-parter, because I think we'll just get the cover on and then maybe do some colouring and painting of it later. I don't know whether I'll go for rusty corners again. I might not. I'll have to see what it looks like when I get there. I don't want to plan too much in advance because I want to be free to follow the impulse as I go. So this was covered with some Tim Holtz tissue wrap. These have been discontinued, sadly, these large rolls, but you can still get the collage papers, and you could use a pre-coloured collage paper, of course, if you don't have that. I'm going to use some of my own PaperArtsy tissue papers. I have got whole sheets as well, but I'm hoping that I can put together something from these pieces that have been left over from other projects. I'll show you that when we get going. You could also, of course, stamp on tissue paper and use stamped tissue paper. That's fine, depending on the designs you want. Those are my cornflower stamps from PaperArtsy, and they're onto some tissue paper. In fact, I think it might have been tracing paper onto one of the jars. That was just to kind of show that you don't have to have ready tissue paper. There are lots of beautiful tissue papers available, just shop bought for gift wrap, that you could also use. But yeah, I'm going to go with some of my Botanicals because that feels like a nice thing. But I also have been wanting to use this gorgeous Tim Holtz palette paper on something, and so, as well as an altered book journal today, I thought I might put a cover on this mixed media journal. I think it's a Dina Wakley journal that's been sitting around, and I just felt the paper yesterday and thought, well, hang on, I want to work in this in 2025. Yeah, so if we get around to it, I'm just going to do a simple covering of that with this in points when this one is resting. I'm going to prep and cover this book ready for working. People have often asked me whether I take pages out when I'm working with an altered book journal so as not to overload the book. But as you can see, no, I really like this chunky look to it. I know that it can make it easier to work, particularly as you get to the end here, and you can see that I'm no longer working flat when I'm working in this journal. If I had removed pages, that would be less, but it would still be present as a problem, I think. What I tend to do is glue pages together so that I've got more solid working surfaces, so there isn't a spread on every single page. Sometimes that gluing doesn't happen and they're still loose. So I could, at a pinch, tear that one apart again and use it. If you haven't seen inside this book, by the way, there is a flip through of this that I will link below in the description. In any case, let's get on with it. Let's prep this book cover. Let's cover it with some tissue paper. I think probably in part 2, we might do some painting and colouring of it. But in between times, hopefully I'll get also to glue this down to here. Okay, let's get the mat out. Back in a sec. Okay, here we go. It's been snowing outside this morning, so it's a bit grey here still. Artificial lights are on, which is another reason for not doing any painting later, because you won't see the natural colours. This is my printed tissue as it comes. You get 4 giant sheets of this. If you want to see a bit more of it in action, there's another video I'll link below, which is me watercolouring this in a large journal page, and I think it'll look pretty cool on here. But obviously, you know me, red is not my happy place. This book cover has also got beautiful texture on the front here, which hopefully we're still going to be able to feel through the tissue paper, because tissue paper is quite fine and thin. But yeah, I can't be doing with red. So the first thing I need to do is cover that up as much as possible. I'm going to start with a coat of white gesso. This happens to be the golden gesso, but any gesso that you like working with. If you haven't got gesso, you can just use acrylic paint for this. I might well do a coat of acrylic paint because gesso doesn't necessarily have the most opaque of finishes, so it might need a little bit of an extra coat or a coat of paint. Again, I shall judge it as I go. See, I love that I've still at the moment got loads of texture going on. I hope this isn't going to be one of these cases where I paint it white and then think, oh, I just like it like that. No, I am going to cover it with tissue paper. I am. But maybe it would be quite nice to find a bit of tissue paper that's not got too much going on it, so that we keep some of that texture. There goes the spine. This is a book picked up in a charity shop. Sadly, charity shops like the Oxfam Bookshop, very often with old hardback books these days, just pulp them. They go into the waste because apparently people don't want them. So if you've got a local secondhand bookshop or charity bookshop, do go in and let them know that you would be interested in hardback books that they have coming in, just to make sure that they don't get pulped before you can get to them. It's always worth just, letting people know that you're after these things, because otherwise they can end up in the trash. And yeah, I am a reader. My name is Words and Pictures, and words were my first love. My first creative life was in the theatre, still is in the theatre, working with words. And so books, the very first time I either ripped up a book to use the pages or the cover, the first time I painted over a book, it was a little bit hard to do. And there may be somebody screaming at the screen right now that this is a vintage copy of Tom Sawyer and what am I doing? For the most part, I tend to alter, airport hardbacks. But sometimes the old books are just better. I'm sorry, they are, because the paper is thicker. It's already got this lovely vintage look to it. It's going to be much more fun, much more inspiring to open and play with. And as I say, this book was just going to be thrown in the trash otherwise. I don't need a copy of Tom Sawyer. Sorry, Tom Sawyer. So this seems to me like another way to give this book life. This way, it's never going to end up in the trash. Well, at least not while I'm alive. Good, and I also don't want these red bits around the inner cover, so I'm just going to make sure they get a little coat. And I'm just using a really cheap craft brush here. It comes from a certain Swedish furniture store in the kids department. I've mentioned them before. They're great little sets of brushes. You get 3 sizes. They come in round and in flat. And the fine ones are really good for having a really fine point. Really useful, actually. And the broad one, this is the medium-sized flat. So the broad one of these is really good for just covering a whole page at a time. I could have used it for this, actually, the broadest. But this was the one that happened to be closest to hand. And then just a little bit round here. If you like red, you could leave yourself your little red framing here. I may, in the long run, do a spread actually on these inner covers. So at the moment, I'm not terribly bothered about the finish. I quite like that rough gesso look. That's good with me, and I might, yeah, there you go. That just gives it a more complete sort of look. So while I let this dry, which I need to before I glue on the tissue paper, I mean, you can press tissue paper onto gesso, and it will sometimes stick, depending on the surface you're using, depending on the quality of the gesso and the thickness of the tissue paper. You could potentially get it to stick just to gesso, but because I'm going to be handling this book, it's going to go in and out of the shelf, I'm going to be opening and closing it while I'm working on it, I do want to make sure I've got a little bit more durability probably to this book cover than I would if, say, I were gessoing and sticking tissue paper to a tag, which is something we might do quite soon as well. Because that's also a lovely way to just start a tag off. Good, so let's pop that down, and I'm going to probably try and, oh look, having it wide open has messed up the spine, so just keep an eye out. Notice that as you go. Good. And you can see, oh, well, I don't know if you can see in this particular light, but there is a little bit of red coming through on there. So that is going to want a second coat. I'm just going to pop it down kind of thusly out of the way so that it can dry. And in the meantime, we'll move on to covering this book here. Back in a sec. I've just put that down to dry over by the window, and it's definitely going to need a second coat because as soon as I got to the daylight, it was very clear that the red was already showing through, especially on the back cover. So pop those to one side out of the way just so for the moment. So in terms of gluing, use whatever glue you've got to hand. It's not, it doesn't matter. The Tim Holtz Distress Collage medium is great for this kind of thing. There's also this golden regular gel gloss. You do want quite a soft glue. It won't be any use trying to use something like the Cosmic Shimmer that I always use because you get too fine an application like this. If you can dip a brush in that and spread it on, then you can do that. But you probably want to do that a little bit diluted because this is quite strong, thick glue. And you'll almost certainly end up with kind of the shape of the glue application showing through. I think for today, I'm going to stick to, well, do I want to use the gloss? My feeling is that under the tissue paper, it's not going to be glossy because the tissue paper will cover it up with the tissue paper's sort of matte look. Oh, it's not that one we're using for this. It's this one. It's this beautiful design paper here. I fear this may also have been discontinued, this one, but I grabbed it when I saw it in a sale somewhere a few months back. In fact, it might be longer ago than that. And I think that's going to be rather beautiful on there. It's not quite tall enough, which is frustrating. But maybe what we'll do is repeat this line of words down at the bottom here. We should be able to achieve that fairly easily. But look how pretty that's going to be. I think this is probably going to be a book for some watercolour, maybe watercolour swatching in here. Haven't quite decided. But yeah, I think that's going to be a lovely, or if we move it up, then the other thing we could do is add another line from further down so that we've got more colours. We'll see, we'll see. Anyway, these soft glues, what I was saying was using the gloss gel medium, using that up on something like this is something I quite like to do because I rarely want a gloss medium if the gloss is going to show. I bought it in the early days of crafting. You can see still, I bought this way more than 10 years ago and still haven't used it all. I have gone through a whole pot of the equivalent version in matte because I prefer a matte finish, and so if any glue is going to show up, I would rather it shows up matte than shows up gloss. If you're a glossy kind of person, then you'll probably prefer a gloss glue with an extra bit of shine every now and then. So what I'm going to do is, let's have a look at the inside of this. I might, I think, start it just on the inside there, just so we've got that covering of the edge. And I'm getting quite a decent coat of this on here because I want to try and make sure I don't have air bubbles. I mean, if I do have air bubbles, as you'll probably guess, it's not a massive problem for me because I like additional texture. I'm uninterested in perfection. If you haven't spotted that by now, then you haven't watched enough videos here. Let's get that on. And then it's going to be just about being bold, I'm afraid. You've just got to take the plunge and put it down. You will be able to do a certain amount of smoothing once it's there. I need a bit more. I'm going to go over the edge and then I'll trim later. Do I want those words at the top? Yes, I do. So you have got a little bit of playtime just before it sets. And then I'm just going to smooth in every direction that I can. And I have got wrinkles and I don't mind. That's sort of the important thing. It's Tim Holtz's constant refrain, embrace imperfection, and I do. But what I do want to make sure is that it's well glued down, even in its wrinkles. So that gives me a nice thing. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and carry on around the spine straight away. But first, we'll glue this down to here so that we've got that going over the edge. And again, what I might be going to do afterwards is give this a coat of a matte varnish, because again, I do want a bit of resilience to this, definitely. It's going to, like the other one, come in and out of the bookshelf. I'm going to be working in it. So let's carry on gluing across the spine. So the spine is always a bit tricky because the paper is in one position when the spine is closed, and it has to move to another position when the spine opens. So you're always going to have a bit of, excuse me, still slightly croaky, but as you can hear, really not much. There's always going to be a little bit of conflict around the spine of a book because of that mobility, because it has to be flexible enough to open and close. So the important thing is to get it down into any ridges and leave enough flex in it that it is going to be able to open and close. Getting a nice wrinkle going on there. And now let's flip over, spread you out in that direction. Let's get the last of this onto here. This book has got itself dirty in the meantime. Not bothered about that. Again, this is a book I picked up in a sale at some point, grabbed it. Yeah, it is Dina Wakley. Look, there's the Ranger. There's the Ranger mark. The paper in here is gorgeous. It's the same, I think, as the white pages in the big mixed media journal that has a variation of pages, has some Hessian, has some sketchbook pages, and this is the textured sort of mixed media watercolor paper. Beautiful paper to work on. Really hard wearing, takes lots of liquid media. So again, I'm embracing those wrinkles. There aren't many of them, so I could afford to embrace them. And I'm not quite straight, and that's also fine. I'll live. It's not going to cause me physical pain. I know there are people out there for whom that would cause physical pain for the thing not to be straight. Let's just curl that over there. The good thing about tissue paper is it's lovely and flexible. And if you've got too much of it, you can just rip it and tear it. I'm going to trim this just because it's now getting awkward. Before I glue down the last bit, I can see that that's going to be plenty. I'm still going to need to trim after that, just so that I can get this bit over onto here. There's still glue on the brush, plenty of it. Let's catch that bit up there while we're there. And over it goes. Oh, I love that little edging of the colour. The other side it's words, but at that side we've got that little edging of colour. Grand. So let's trim that off. If I were making this as a gift for somebody else, I would probably be a little more perfectionist about my finishes. But it's for me, and frankly, I don't care. I want the book ready to play in rather than having to be a beautiful object in itself. But already I can see as I pick this up off the shelf, this is already going to inspire me. Love that. Love that already. So we just need a little bit to go along here. Yeah, and I think I am perfectionist enough to want it to continue this. So where are we? Red, orange. Okay, that's going to involve a lot of nonsense, isn't it? Do I care if I like? Yes, I definitely care that it says orange under the word blue. Or do I? Is that quite fun? Or do I want more colours? Maybe I want colours, in which case I need to start at purples. Yeah, okay, we're going to do it. So that means this bit is free to use on some tags. I'll almost certainly glue that onto a couple of tags, or maybe ATCs to use as a background, or I could glue it onto a journaling page in the other book to start us off. And it needs to be, how long? Where does it go to? See, now I know. I've got to go to just to the greens, past the orange. So purple, la 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 la. Oh, it's the yellows. Okay, so that's going to be enough. This top strip is also going to be available because I'm going to start 3 colours down. So I can take off, can I take off all of the top 3? Yes, I can. And we'll just overlap a little bit there, just to be sure. So there's another strip I can use on all sorts of projects. In fact, I really want to glue it to a journaling page quite soon. That may also happen in this video. And I'm going to have another strip, an even bigger strip. Save all of those because you can use them. So that's going to go in there like so. And we are just going to get to the tip of the colour. But we really don't need much. It's just going to be one strip will do it. So let's take it to there just to make sure we've got enough to fold over. It's going to be plenty. And I've got all these colours to use elsewhere. Like so that's going to line up to here. Grand. Okay, here we go. Glue. And it doesn't matter if there's a little overlap. It's tissue paper, especially when it gets wet, when it comes in contact with the glue, it's going to become translucent. So if there's a little extra layer, a little extra double layer, that's not going to be a problem. But you do need to make sure that you've glued so that it can attach. Much going on there. So this is where maybe using a matte finish would have made me happier. But I can always go over the top with a matte varnish. And that will sort us out. There you go, perfect. Perfect. Little addition to the bottom there. And in the long run, I'll forget that that even was an extra bit of paper. It'll just be part of the mix. Around over the spine. Trying to stay lined up. Trying not to stretch it as I put it down. Okay, and at the back, because we're not on quite straight, we are going to get to the little tips of colour. Let's make sure there's enough glue for that to glue to. There we go. So I'm going to make sure I line it up. Even if it means there's a little wrinkle, because I think otherwise it will annoy me. There we go. Beautiful. Perfect. And you can still see Ranger underneath. Look, that's nice. Credit where credit's due. It's a beautiful journal and I'm looking forward to playing in it. Some of that will undoubtedly appear on the channel in due course. Okay, so we've got this little bit sticking out from the bottom. I'm going to trim some of it and fold some of it. So I'm just going to take off the excess. I need a little bit of excess because I do want to glue it around the edge. This again is where the long shears come into their own, because basically in one sweep I can get from one end to the other. Take that off. Okay, and then just a little bit round inside here with the glue. And fold it over. Work it in. Nice. Little bit round into the spine, and that I'm going to make sure has got plenty of glue on, and then a little bit here around the inside cover. I'm kind of trying to catch the tissue paper as well as the book as I'm gluing there, just because that'll give it more moisture and allow it to really bed down into the book. Okay, let's get you glued. I'm sorry, I'm speechless with delight. So yeah, I could go with a coat of the gloss. No, I don't want it gloss. I'm going to use a coat of the Distress Collage Medium in matte, just to seal that, to give it durability. I might wait until that has dried, just because if you get tissue paper too wet all in one go, then you increase the risk of it ripping. And tissue paper is, you know, it's delicate stuff. So I'm going to let that dry now, come back to my other book and see if it needs a second coat of gesso. Let me go and put that down and pick the other one up. Back in a sec. Right, even in this light, I think you can probably see there's a pinkish glow to this because the dye in those old cloth boards is seeping through the gesso. So There are a number of ways. You can just keep going with coats of gesso. You could now choose to put on a coat of white acrylic paint of any kind that you've got. You can also choose to seal with a medium and hope that that keeps the red underneath before you go for another coat of white. So given I've got this here, I think I'm going to go with that option just because we can experiment and see whether that's going to seal in some of that red dye, which I don't want, even though it's turned a kind of, I mean, is it an acceptable shade of salmon pink? I don't know. I'm on a journey with pink, and there are some pinks that I can really get on board with, but I don't think that this is one of them. And in any case, if I want my botanicals to be fully green, I don't really want a pink glow coming through. It would give you a sort of sunshine feeling, I guess, maybe, if you had that. So this is a, oh, hello. I mentioned that was a cheap brush. And yeah, it's sat in water quite often. If I just pinch that with some pliers, I can pinch the ferrule, which is what that metal holding bit is called, and get it to be tight again. But it doesn't stop the brush working. So I'm going to dry that with the heat tool, which you don't need to see happen, and hope that that gives us a coat. Okay, time to get the pliers out. And hope that that gives us a coat that will seal in some of that red and enable the next coat of white to stay white. Drying time. I thought there's probably a limit to the number of times you need to see me paint a book cover. So this is just to show you that after drying that coat of the gel medium, I've put on a coat of the PaperArtsy Snowflake, beautifully opaque paint, and you can see that that's giving me good coverage of that pinkness. So I'm going to carry on with that, and I'll be back when it's time to start applying the tissue paper. There is still a very faint peachy glow to this, but I think I'm going to live with it, partly because it'll be like a Renaissance underpainting colour that will give a sort of warmth to it. I am going to be painting this tissue paper in the long run, and yeah, it's going to cover things up. I'm not entirely sure which bits I want on the cover. I think I need to have Shakespeare. Shakespeare is the great literary love of my life, theatrical love of my life, and yeah, I think I want his name front and centre. There's some of my botanical berry sketches there. This paper is created from botanical sketches that are also available as PaperArtsy stamps, of course, and the stamp versions are much, much smaller. This is a sort of giant size rosemary, giant size hawthorn, giant size rose hips, and yeah, larger versions of some of the theatrical ephemera that are also on these stamps. As I come over to the back, so that I'm using more than one, I'm thinking I might lose those rose hips and instead kind of layer in these blackberries, which I love the brambles. They make me very happy. And then I could even have another Shakespeare on the back, or I could go for slightly higher up and get a few more berries on, and the leaf is quite nice. Yeah, so I think Shakespeare might drop off the bottom of that one. He's already got a nice prominent position on the front. Yeah, so that's going to be there-ish, and sort of down to there. Might rip. Yeah, let's not rip yet because we don't know which bits we're going to want. Let's get the front bit on. You can see the paint's not quite dry, bits are turning up. Do we want Shakespeare up, down? Do we want that towards there with more berry and less rosemary, or do we want lots of rosemary? I think we probably want lots of rosemary, and we want that E just making it shh. We definitely want the shh over the spine. Yeah, good. Okay, it's going to be that. In which case I could take off this because that's going to make life awkward. Let's just trim across there. I might keep that seal intact because I might want that. That's the image that was found on a ring, a signet ring found in a field just near the church in Stratford-upon-Avon, that people then decided must be William Shakespeare's ring, because nobody else ever had the initials WS, of course. But as a stamp, when that's a rubber stamp, you can actually stamp it into air dry clay or into wax, and you get yourself a proper sort of signet ring seal, which is quite fun. I think we can lose the S. Mr. William Shakespeare is good rather than the S there. And then I get enough rosemary at the bottom. And I'm going to bring round, see, if I wanted to, I could overlay that into that space there. That might be something we think about doing. Because as I say, with this opaque tissue paper, everything's up for grabs. Shall we go with the gloss again? Or maybe we'll... collage medium. Have I got more collage medium? Am I going to run out? I think I've got another collage medium ready to go when this one runs out. Where's my brush gone? Still sitting in the water. That, of course, is how the ferrule starts to go loose if you leave your brushes sitting in the water for too long. So collage medium, might give that just a little spritz of water. It's slightly dried out because I'm right down at the bottom of the pot. So it's a bit gloopy, but it'll do the job. It'll absolutely do the job. No problem with that. I'm delighted that I've still got a bit of texture going on here, that book texture. It would make a great stencil, actually, that design. There's one similar to that already in the Tim Holtz collection. It's kind of ringing a bell. Can't remember what it's called, lattice or something. That stencil. Oh look, there's paintbrush. So having said these are great little brushes, they're just at the point where they're causing chaos by losing their heads and losing hairs. Good, I like that. I've got some rosemary there. I've got room to put extra stuff there. Let's rub those berries in. See, the warm glow is going to help the hawthorn berries. It's going to be a little bit annoying for the sky, but sky blue pink is a lovely colour after all. Not quite enough glue going down this side, so let's get that on. And I think what I'll probably start with when I paint this next time around is I will start with a little coat of some matints, because they create a beautiful sort of underpainting coat with a beautiful translucent glow that is permanent, and they're a lovely base for then adding watercolour or other mediums. Just making sure this is fully glued, because as I say, this book is going to want to be reasonably durable. Okay, coming round onto here, I definitely want the top part of this, but I sort of don't want this part. So in order to tear my tissue paper with a soft line rather than a hard cut line, I'm going to paint with water along where I want the tear to happen. Just a little paper water line, and with luck that should allow the tissue paper to just separate. See that happening along where I painted that line? So they get a nice soft line. That's going to show up much less than a hard cut line would. Right, let's get into this spine here with my slightly gloopy collage medium. And the important bit for me here is to get that SH onto the spine. I really, really, really want that as part of what's going on here. I don't think I got to the end of the sentence ever. If you want to know more about my Shakespeare life, take a look at my website, alisonbomber.com, where you can see words and pictures and understand a bit more about why that's my name, and how that deep connection to both is part of my creative journey in the world. Grand. So that's gone on beautifully. And again, I'm going to trim the excess, but I want to leave some just for folding over, just so that I can, again, get that extra protection over the tops. Tuck that in a minute. Grand. And same here. And again, I'll keep pretty much all these bits because they can add detail or layers into. That's not very well glued down there, is it? Am I still going to be able to get that up? There's a big spot here that I didn't get glue onto the undersurface. If I'm very gentle, see, it's always rescuable. Let's just make sure we get that fully glued down. And the paper will be fragile at this point because it's wet with the glue. So this is a point to be very careful, she said, smashing it. There we go. once it's dried, it'll be really quite solid and firm. If you want to go over with an extra sort of little bit of varnish, as we did on, as I'm planning to do on the other, you absolutely can, but I probably won't do that until I've painted it now. What I will probably do with this one is go over with a coat of clear gesso, because the clear gesso gives you a lovely surface for painting with, for instance, watercolours. Good, happy with that. Let's get round onto here. I might fold all of this in actually, just give me a nice not blank starting point. There we go. And I actually rather like those berries coming round onto the inside as well. And that's one of my favourite ephemera pieces too that's going on there, so that's quite nice to have. Again, if I were doing this for somebody else, I'd probably take greater care with all this finishing, but it's just me, and I'll probably paint over it later anyway. And that one, fold over. Oh yeah, no, we can fold that over, that's fine. Let's trim off that corner, don't need that. But then glue this down. There we go. Okay, I really like that as an end paper now, actually. Good, shall we tuck that in? Yeah, let's glue that down as well. So there's a bit that needs tucking into the spine, just like so. It's got a bit of glue in there, but let's give it a little bit extra. Let's glue down in the spine, and then a little bit here. There it goes. I've made that too wet, but when it dries, it will be nice and solid. Grand. So onto this back bit. Oh, that pink. You see the pink? Oh, how frustrating. That pink having got moist again. They really must have dyed these book boards with really potent colourings, because it really is making itself felt again. Okay, so what I'm aiming to do here is just get some of this going on. I don't want to cover up Shakespeare. I do sort of want that berry there. I need enough to fold over at the top. So the cutting point with my little water brush, it's not a water brush, it's a brush with water on, is going to kind of come down round this berry. Let's keep that berry for now. Let's keep that berry for now. And then we want to come round like so and tear. So again, that should come apart along that line of water. Just create, where did I go with the water? There it is. Couldn't see where I'd put my painted water. There we go. So that's going to just kind of overlay. Might get rid of just a little bit more along there because it's covering up the Shakespeare printing bit. Hopefully I'll be able to, yeah, just lose that little bit extra. Perfect. That's going to be great. Let's get some glue on. Yeah, this my collage medium really is at the very end of its life down at the bottom of the pot here. It wouldn't usually be quite this gluey. It's usually a much softer sort of buttery cake kind of texture. Excuse me, my voice is protesting at doing this much talking. Okay, I'm not going to go right to the edges here because I'll probably want to pick up anyway, or maybe I am. I'm lying. I'm going to put a good amount of glue because I don't want to have to do what I did on the front cover. It was a miracle that I managed that without it tearing. Don't want to risk having to do that again. So let's make sure we've got plenty of glue to get this on. And that needs to go to about there, and the berry's going to go to about there, and that should probably do nicely down in that bit of the spine. Press that down, press that down. Again, I'm embracing the wrinkles, but I do need to make sure that I've got enough give when the book is shut. So let's just close. I think it's going to rip down the front cover. Not to worry. It'll be extra texture. And you know how I love extra texture. Let's just close it very slowly. Yeah, it's got just enough give. Just enough give to close. Great. Perfect. So this needs a little bit of glue under here because that berry is going over paper as opposed to over book. But you can see as soon as you add that moisture, it's just layering in as though that's the only thing going on. Let's get a little bit under here so that we can allow this to just melt into the other bit. And there we go, all the way to the edges. And again, let's trim off the excess. I might try and preserve enough of this works of William Shakespeare, except, oh, well, I can't decide. I liked the extra stuff going over into the pages at the front, but that's just going to be upside down because it's text. So I don't think I want too much of that to fold over. I will fold over that berry because I like it. I might fold over some of this, but it's mostly blank, so it's not going to be that interesting on the inside. So little coat here to fold over this bit. Little coat here to fold over this bit. And that's more interesting than the edge piece, so I'm going to make sure that gets in. Whereas this, I might do a little trim, because as you can see, it's really not very interesting, that particular edge part. And along there. Let's glue that down. As you can see, tissue paper is really very forgiving. We used to wrap school books in wrapping paper when I was a teenager, and that sometimes caused great problems at the edges and on the corners because it was too stiff to behave well. Whereas tissue paper, you can bend it, you can double it over, you can get 2 layers of it, and you'll still get a fairly neat finish. So it remains to be seen, excuse me, in the next episode, how much coverage we can get on this pinkness. It is going to be like Renaissance underpainting. I should have been patient and done another coat, but maybe with the growth of my acceptance of pink, that's a good adventure to go on with that covering. So I think that's probably enough for today, is it? Except I decided looking at it that I do probably in the long run want some of this rusty texture, which we'll do next time. That is over some grit paste, but I think it's probably easier to paint without that there, so that'll be part of next week's as well. There we go. So let's have a look at our other one. Haven't turned the camera off this time, just gone over the other side of the room to pick it up. So there's my one that went onto a white cover, ready to play with. There's my other one, covered and ready to glue next time. Actually, I should probably leave it like that to dry. A little bit sticking up there, so do keep an eye out on that. You can either glue that down or rip it off. I'm going to glue it down. In fact, I'm even going to do it with my fingertip, because that's going to be just as effective as getting the brush out of the water again. There we go. Nicely coated. That bit's not glued down inside the spine. Let's tuck it up underneath. Really good way to get down that spine, rather than with a paintbrush or anything like that, is a little palette knife. Will do the job of tucking paper up into the spine of the book, like so, for a slightly neater finish. There we go. So you've been along for the ride for that. I hope you'll join me again. It might be next week. It might be the week after, depending on whether we do anything in between. But yeah, my books are getting ready for the coming year. I just needed to have another one ready to go, because I know I'm going to be sad when I've completely filled that other altered book. So there will be some painting of these pictures next time around. and you'll probably be seeing the insides of these books fairly soon. I'll dive in for a quick little close-up, although we're only part way with most of this. I'll probably give this a coat of matte gel medium. It's basically the same as this, the regular gel, but in matte. Just as I say, to give it a firmer, more durable cover. This one I'll wait to paint, and then I'll give it a final coat to protect it later. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you'll maybe be inspired to create some book journals for yourself to play with over the course of this year. If you want to craft along with me, we're going to spend some more time in journal pages this year. So having something ready to play in could be a good idea. Head to your charity bookshops. Thanks so much for watching, and happy crafting all.